What's up guys, Justin here with the SketchUpEssentials.com, back with another SketchUp beginner tutorial for you. So in this video we're going to continue our series on getting started with the desktop version of SketchUp. So if you remember in the last video we talked about some of the basics of drawing in SketchUp. So in this video we're going to start tying those together by creating our first house model inside of SketchUp. So I do want to note, if you want some more in-depth instruction on SketchUp, you should check out my course, the SketchUp Essentials course. So in that course I get really in-depth on working in SketchUp. So in the course we really get in-depth talking about how to use SketchUp. So it's got 14 hours of instruction where we talk about everything from all the different tools, how to use them, as well as how to create some designs, export them to layout, and we even get started with a little bit of rendering. So if that's something you're interested in, make sure to check that out at the SketchUpEssentials.com/course. Now let's go ahead and just jump into it. Alright, so in this video we're going to create an exterior model of a house. Just note that in future videos I'm going to talk about how to get more in-depth on organization and things like that. But for this one we're really going to focus on using those drawing tools so you can get comfortable using those to create things in SketchUp. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to model the footprint of our house. And in this case I want to model the footprint by using the rectangle tool. And so we can activate the rectangle tool by tapping the R key on your keyboard right here. Notice how when you tap R, your cursor turns into a little pencil with a rectangle. And so what we want to do is we want to create our rectangle. And so the first thing we want to do is single click in order to set a base point. One thing to notice about this is I am not clicking and dragging. What I'm doing is I'm single clicking and then moving my mouse. Well, what that does is that activates this tool. And if you look in the lower right hand corner, you can see how the dimensions in there are live. And what that means is that I can actually type in values for my box. So in this case, for example, what I want this to be 15 feet wide by 20 feet long. So what I'm going to do is, for the rectangle tool, this takes two values. So I'm just going to type a value of 15 feet, then I'm going to type a comma, and I'm going to type a value of 20 feet. And then I'm going to tap the enter key. What that's going to do is that's going to draw a 15-foot by 20-foot rectangle. And notice how I didn't actually come in here and type those into, or I didn't click in this rectangle and then type those values in. What I did instead is I just typed this with the tool active. The only other thing to note about that is you probably do want to make sure that you're drawing along the flat axis. So notice how my rectangle here turns blue, indicating that this is on the flat axis between this green and this red axis. And you can lock this to that axis by, once you've started using the rectangle tool, you can tap the up arrow key to lock this to the blue axis. But now what we've done is we've created a rectangle that's going to act as the footprint of our house. And now what we want to do is we want to take this into 3D by extruding it. And so we're going to extrude it by activating a tool called the push-pull tool. You can find that over here, or you can type the P key on your keyboard. And so note that I'm using a lot of keyboard shortcuts because keyboard shortcuts are a lot faster than clicking on the icons over here. So for this one, for example, notice how I'm tapping the P key on my keyboard and then mousing over this in order to use the tool. I do have a printable keyboard shortcut guide that you can download by visiting the SketchUpEssentials.com/beginner. So if you want to download that and put it next to your keyboard so that you can start learning those, that's going to be a good way to do that. But now what we're going to do is we're just going to single click right here with the push-pull tool active. That's going to allow us to extrude this up. And so notice how I'm just extruding this up to whatever height that I want. And because I single clicked instead of clicking and dragging, I can move my mouse around as much as I want until I click again or until I type in a value. Well, in this case, I'm going to type in a value of 12 feet and hit the enter key. So that extruded this up 12 feet tall. And so now let's draw a roof on our building. So the way that we're going to do that is we're just going to activate the line tool by tapping the L key, and we want to move our mouse until we find a midpoint along this line. So we have a midpoint right here. Notice how this gives us a little blue point. So we just want to single click with that tool active, and we want to move our mouse so that this is moving up along the blue axis. And again, you might want to use that keyboard inference locking. The keyboard inference locking means that with a tool active, you can tap the different arrow keys on your keyboard to move your mouse. Then you're locked to an axis, so you know that you're drawing this straight up and down. But what I want to do is I just want to draw this with a height of maybe like 5 feet. So we're just going to type in a value of 5 feet and hit the enter key. So that segment's now been drawn up. And now what I want to do is I want to draw edges from that point to the corner and from this point to the corner. And then I'm going to tap the E key to activate the erase tool. I'm just going to click and drag across this line. So now, if I click on this, with the select tool active, which you can activate by hitting the space key, notice how this is now one uninterrupted face. And so what I want to do with this is I want to extrude this to the back wall. So we're just going to use the push-pull tool again. So you're just going to type the P key, mouse over this face, and single click. And you're going to move your mouse to the back right here. So note how sometimes when you do this, this face will become hollow. So what it'll do is it'll move this back, but you won't get a face that remains right here. If you get that happening, just tap the control key to go to create new face mode, and then it'll create a new face and it'll keep this one active. So if this is ever hollow, then you can just tap the control key in order to fix that. But what you want to do is you want to move your mouse back here, and you want to move it so that you're level with somewhere on this back line, right? It doesn't really matter where you click because the push-pull tool is just moving this a certain distance from this original face. So all you want to do is just mouse over this point right here and click. And notice how this turned kind of a grayish color. So faces in SketchUp have two different face orientations, right? Faces in SketchUp have a front and back face. And so if you look at this, you'll notice how on one side of this face that I just drew is a white color, and the other side of the face that I drew is a gray color. And so the white is the front side of the face, and the gray is the back side of the face. So you can flip that by right-clicking on that face and then selecting the option for reverse faces. And so usually we try to keep the front side of faces facing the camera whenever you can. So there's some practical reasons for that, but also it just looks better because you don't have a whole bunch of like different colored faces in your model. So I would recommend doing that. And then now what we want to do is we want to add a little extension to our roof. Right? Because really you get a little bit of an overhang on roofs in real life, and so we want to add this here. And so we're going to do that by activating the offset tool. And so the offset tool is a tool that basically takes all of the edges of a connected face and it moves them in a set direction inside or outside. So the way this is going to work is you're going to left click on this face, you're going to tap the F key on your keyboard, and you're going to single click. Notice how when I single click, what this does is this takes all of the edges of this face and it offsets them either in or out. Well, we just want to move our mouse so that we're in the out direction, and then we're just going to type in a value of 6 inches. So just type a 6 and hit the enter key. And so notice how what that did is that offset this out in all the different directions, right? So up on both of these and then down as well. Well, notice how these automatically split because they intersect with these edges right here. Well, what that means is that we can actually come in here with the erase tool just by tapping the E key and then clicking and dragging across this, and we can erase this edge. And so notice how now what we have is we just have a face right here. And so we want to take this face, we want to tap the P key to activate the push-pull tool, and we want to extrude this so that it's aligned with our back wall like this. And then the last thing I want to do is I just want to give this an overhang on either side. So I'm going to, and notice how this face isn't highlighting. That's because the back face is selected here. So you can just do a Control T to deselect that. So now I don't have any faces selected. So now anything I mouse over, the push-pull tool is going to give me this little shaded look to it. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to single click, and I'm just going to extrude this out 12 inches forward. Then I'm going to go to the back, and I'm going to extrude this 12 inches to the back. So now we have a house with a roof on top of it. And you can go ahead and erase out these edges if you want to. They're not really doing anything for us right now anyway. So now this is just an uninterrupted face. And so now let's use the drawing tools in SketchUp to add a door and a window. So to create a door, there's a pretty easy way to do this. We're just going to activate the rectangle tool by tapping the R key, and we're going to mouse over a face. And notice how this is changing orientation to line up with whatever face I mouse over inside of SketchUp. Well, what I want to do is I want to single click and move my mouse, and I want to draw a 3 foot by 7 foot door. So I'm going to type in 3 foot, 7 foot, and hit the enter key. What that does is that draws a 3 foot by 7 foot rectangle in this face. And so that's a good start, but we want to give it a little bit of depth, right? Because things don't just align perfectly with faces right here, so it doesn't look very good. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the offset tool by tapping the F key and then single clicking. We're going to offset this out by the thickness of a frame. In this case, I'm going to say that's going to be 2 inches. And I'm going to hit the enter key. And I'm also going to erase out this extra that creates at the bottom. And then finally, I'm going to use the push-pull tool to give this just a little bit of depth. Not a lot, but enough that we've got just a little bit of distance from that face, maybe like an inch or something like that. And so what that's done is that's given me a door as well as a frame inside of this model. And so one thing to note is in future videos when we start creating buildings with walls with thickness, we're going to approach this a little bit differently. For now, I want you to focus more on the drawing tools, and then in the future we can talk about creating openings and separate door groups and other things like that. For now, I just want you learning these tools. And so what I want to do is I want to create a window that has the same height as this door frame. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to start by creating a guideline inside of SketchUp. And so you can use the tape measure tool over here in order to do that. So I'm going to click right here to activate that tool. Well, that tool, first of all, allows us to measure things in our model, right? So if I was to single click, move my mouse, and then mouse over this point, you can see how this gives us a distance. However, the other thing this is good for is for creating guidelines, which is basically a line that's inside of SketchUp that acts as a guide without actually being geometry. And so you can activate create guide mode with this tool active by hitting the control key. And so I want to hit control key so that this little plus shows up next to my icon inside of SketchUp. And so with that little plus, or the little 2 dotted lines in the plus next to my cursor, that's telling me that create guide mode is activated. And so what I want to do is I just want to single click on this edge. I'm going to move my mouse up. And so what I want to do is I want to hold the shift key to lock that inference to the blue axis. Then I want to mouse over this point right here, and I want to click. And so when I click, notice how this creates this guideline in here. And the guideline is basically just a visual indicator of a measurement. It's like snapping a chalk line if you've ever done anything with construction. So it's in here, but it doesn't really affect anything other than give you something to inference to. And so I'm going to create another guide off of this one with the tool just by single clicking, moving my mouse down and typing in a value of 4 feet. And then I'll draw another guide, maybe 36 inches off of this corner, and one more. My window, it's going to be maybe like 6 feet. So what that does is that gives me a face that I can draw a rectangle along with the rectangle tool to draw my window. And so I'm going to go ahead and draw a rectangle in here. And then I'm going to use the erase tool by tapping E and click and drag across all of these to delete them. So now I have a window that's aligned with the top of my door frame. And then I'm just going to tap the F key. I'm going to offset this in 2 inches. And I'm going to push pull. We'll do a control T to deselect. Then I'm going to do a push pull just by clicking. I'm going to type in a value of 1 inch. So now I have a door and a window. And so one other thing I want to do just to kind of make our house a little bit more interesting, because right now if we were to come in here and add a material, like say a brick, and we'll talk more about materials in a second, but you can see how it's very like boring, right? Like it's not broken up into multiple materials or anything like that. Like generally you'd have more detail on a face than this. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little trick to create a brick wainscot down along the outside of my house. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the move tool to copy this perimeter up. So what we could do is we could come in here and draw a line all the way around, right? We could click, 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 and just click all the way around to separate this into faces. But what I want to do instead is I've already got that perimeter down below, right? So if I was to double click on this and then do a shift click to deselect the face, I've got edges that are going to run around my model, right? And so what I want to do is I just want to create a copy of those edges up here so that they split this face. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by deselecting. So I'm just going to hold the shift key and drag a box from left to right over these edges because I don't want those. I don't want to split my door up. But what I want to do is I just want to use the move tool in copy mode to copy those edges up. So just tap the M key, and then the move tool lets you move things around in SketchUp, right? But if I move this around right now, I'm getting all this like geometry stretching and all of that. I don't want that. What I want to do instead is I want to single click with the move tool with these edges active, and I'm going to tap the control key. Well, what the control key does is that puts me in copy mode. It just creates a copy of the geometry that I had selected. So I'm just going to hold the shift key. I'm going to move my mouse up and I'm going to align this with this corner right here, right? So what that's done is that's taken that edge and it's moved it up all the way around my building. And so when it did that, it split all of these faces, right? So I can really quickly create that brick wainscot in here. Well, now I just want to give this a little bit of thickness, like not a ton, just a little bit, right? Because if this was brick, then this would be a little bit thicker than what you have up above. And so the way that I'm going to do that is I'm just going to use the push-pull tool to push-pull that out. So I'm going to do a Control-T to deselect. And then I'm just going to push this out. Notice how this is limiting me to 1 inch where my frame is. So you might need to push-pull this out to 1 inch and then push-pull it out a little bit more. Notice how this is limiting me to 1 inch right now, right? Because this is where this aligns with this edge. So I'm going to push-pull this once, then I'm going to push-pull it out again, maybe another like, we'll call it another 2 inches. So just something to give me a little bit of thickness where my brick would be. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to push-pull this out 1 inch, push-pull it out 2 more inches. And then for the others, I can just push-pull them out by 2 inches like this. Or actually it would be 3 inches to make everything line up. And then I can come over here and I can just double click in order to do that again, because this tool retains the last distance that you entered for it. So you can just come in here and double click in order to really quickly do this, but we're running into our wall frame again. So we're just going to do 2 more inches and call it good. So now we have a house with a brick wainscot down below. We've got a roof, we've got doors and windows. So the last thing I want to do is I want to add materials. And so the materials section can be found over here in the materials part of your tray. If you're on a Mac, you don't have a tray, you have Windows. So you need to go up and find the Windows option and turn on materials. Your material editor is going to look a little bit different as well. But what we want to do is we just want to click in here and just find some materials that we can use. So for example, on this one, I want to start by adding brick down below. And so I'm going to use the brick rough dark in order to do this. Well, notice how I can come in here and I can just click on a face in order to apply a material to that face. So notice how I'm just coming in here and I'm just painting in a material on these faces. So I've applied a material to all of these faces. Now let's apply a different material to the faces up above. So notice how I can come in here and I can apply this siding material to this face. Well, what if I decide I don't like this color and there's another color in here? Well, I can just come in here and I can just click on that color and click on this face in order to apply that new material. So I can use this to really quickly apply this siding material to my face. And we can talk in the future about adjusting sizes and other things like that. Just really quick, not to get too in-depth, you can go into the Edit tab and you can type in new values to adjust the size of this. We'll focus on that more in the future. But I just want to go through and I want to finish adding materials to this house. So I'm going to add a shingle roof material to the roof, like this. And I'm going to add a transparent glass material to my window. So I'm going to go to the glass and mirror section. I'm just going to find this translucent glass blue and click right here. And so what that did is that applied a material that's actually clear to this object. So what that means is that I can actually see into the inside of our house through this window. So those glass materials are actually something that you can see through inside of your models. And then the last thing I might do is I might come in here and add like a gray material or something like that to my window frames and my door frames. And so in the future, when we do this, we would probably have these frames kind of grouped all as one group so that you wouldn't have to come in and do the faces individually. We're not going to focus too much on that for right now. For right now, we're just going to focus on getting all of these faces colored. And then we're going to call this good. And so notice how there's a place right here where I missed my brick. And so I want to apply the brick to this face, but I don't want to have to go back through and find it again, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little eyedropper right here, the sample paint tool. That allows me to click on a surface and sample the paint material on that surface so I can quickly select it. And then I'm just going to paint these edges in. So that should give you a pretty good idea of how to use the SketchUp drawing tools to create a house in SketchUp. In the future, we'll get more in depth about creating walls to look better in floor plans and other things like that. But for right now, I just want you to practice with these tools and start getting comfortable with them because you're going to be drawing with them a lot in SketchUp. If you have any questions about anything we talked about, leave them in the comments down below. And if you're looking for some more in-depth training on SketchUp where you really kind of dive in and really learn the program, make sure to check out my course at the sketchupessentials.com/course. If you like this video, please remember to click that like button down below. If you're new around here, remember to click that subscribe button for new SketchUp content every week. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this. I really appreciate it, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.